Hey, greetings, folks. Brother Goodwin here, Prophet in the Spotlight. I want to read a very shocking verse to you here. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. I'm not going to read the whole verse. The second half says this. There shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time, thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. The Bible's talking here about a very serious time, the worst time to ever come upon the world, called the time of Jacob's trouble. It is, in fact, the second half of the tribulation period that we call Daniel's 70th week. In the midst of the week, it begins. The most ferocious time ever to come upon the world, upon Israel and the entire world. You don't want to be here for this. You better make sure you're born again, ready to go to heaven, and when that trumpet sounds, you go to heaven. You don't want to be on the earth during this time, I promise you. We're going to discuss Daniel chapter 12 in today's program. Stay tuned. Greetings, everybody. We got a very somber show for you today from Daniel 12. A lot of excitement in Daniel 12, but there's a lot of bad stuff too. There's bad stuff coming. That's why Doc and I believe it's so important what we're doing here at Prophet in the Spotlight. We're preparing you for the time of the end. Yes, we're going to be taken up in the rapture, but what about before the rapture? We need to be about some business here. And Doc's got something for it. We're going to share just a little tidbit that we didn't get to last week in chapter 11. But to get your Bible ready, we're going to be in Daniel chapter 12 today. But Doc's got something we're going to share with you briefly, just for 3 or 4 minutes, that we didn't get to last week in Daniel 11. Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, well, we talked about the dual prophecies and the possible dual prophecies. There's another one, I think, that is there, and not just only in chapter 11, but other places in the Bible. It indicates that there's going to be 4 major entities, I believe, during the Antichrist days. A king of the West, I believe that's the Antichrist kingdom. Then there's the king of the South, and that's one that's in chapter 11, and I believe that is the Islamic Caliphate. And then there's, just like in chapter 11, there's the pushing of the North. These kings again, I believe that's Russia. And then in the Bible, we find there's a king of the East. I'm convinced that's China. And just as we see the plots that were laid out in chapter 11 between the North and the South, trampling over the pleasant land and all of that, the same thing's going to happen in the tribulation as these 4 major entity powers are actually working against each other for absolute dominance of the world.
And we better get right with the Lord, because that means even before the Antichrist comes on the scene, there's going to be,
That's right.
There's going to be turmoil, there's going to be death. And
we need to make sure that we know we are saved. We're doing everything we can to get our family saved and everybody we care about, and even those you don't know.
Yeah.
We need to be involved, because there is a time coming when we're already watching, I believe, we're watching these 4 major entities right now in the world pushing against each other.
Sure.
They want to be the top dog to run the world. Yeah. And so that was something that I think was foreshadowed. It did play out to a certain level historically, but I believe we're watching it play out in the end times prophetically.
In other words, just like Epiphanes is a type of the Antichrist, those 3 other entities were involved as well.
Yes.
And will probably be, like you say, like dual prophecy also, that those will be involved.
And you're watching, if you don't see that these 4 major powers are actually pushing against each other in the world today, you're not looking.
They're trying to see which one of us will be on top.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, before we get to chapter 12, just want to briefly thank our partners out there, those who support us, those who every now and then write a check or get your credit card and donate. We do have a payment coming up. We're not quite there yet. We're still short. If somebody could write a check or make the phone call or go on the website and hit the donate button. If you need help with that, call us. If you'd like to talk to me or Doc, we'd be happy to talk to you about how your money is used and what happens to it. And is there a bottomless pit that it goes into? Yeah, it's called television. It goes in a hole and it's gone. And very, very expensive to be on television. But we feel the need. We really do. We feel like there's a lot of people there that don't have computers. They'll never see our program on YouTube or Rumble. We've got to be, at least for now, we feel like we need to be on television. So,
Yes.
pray about it. If you want to be involved, maybe you've never given before. We'd love to get you on board here. And there's no amount too little. $25. There's people that send us 10. And then we have some $1,000 givers. And God bless them all. We need them all.
Amen.
And the need is here now. In the next few weeks, we need some help if we're going to keep up with the TV bill. Okay. Daniel chapter 12, Doc. There's only 13 verses in this chapter, but every guy that preaches prophecy goes to chapter 12. Right. I guarantee you that.
Oh, yes.
I wrote, here's what I give for the theme of Daniel chapter 12, and really the end of the book of Daniel. But it's not just the end of the book of Daniel, it's the end of the age here.
It is.
The theme is this: the time of Jacob's trouble and deliverance. Thank God for the deliverance part.
Amen.
But the time of Jacob's trouble. I wrote a little paragraph here. Let me read that for you folks at home. By the way, right out of my Daniel study guide here. Many of you have ordered this. If you don't have it yet, spiral bound. Be very helpful to you. Here's the first thing I wrote in this chapter. Here we come to the conclusion of it all. The end of the book of Daniel, which reveals the end of the 6,000th year, the end of this age, and then the beginning, of course, of the kingdom age. We see the kingdom age ushered in. Chapter 12 is the end of the vision of Daniel, and a very violent end where God's wrath upon sin is poured out upon this earth. And boy, is it poured out. Daniel 12:1 says this, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince. We saw Michael back in chapter 10, remember? The angel Michael. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time, thy people, speaking of Israel, shall be delivered. Everyone, doesn't mean all of them, everyone that shall be found written in the book. In other words, saved people. It is obvious in verse 1 that we are reading some harsh words about Israel concerning the last half of Daniel's 70th week. It is during this terrible time that Israel shall be delivered. And I've got Daniel chapter 12, verse 2-4 here. They that shall be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. Then Daniel is told, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, knowledge shall be increased. Doc, before we get to this time of the end stuff that we're going to discuss here, because this is some encouraging things and it's important. You got any comments you want to make on this time of Jacob's trouble?
Well, what we find in the first 4 verses, I believe, is comfort for the support of God's people during those times of trouble. Daniel seeing it, and he's getting now some understanding that even though it's going to be such a great time of trouble, there is comfort, there is hope. And that's great news, because we've read and be able to put this with what we know of the last half of the tribulation, particularly concerning the vials of wrath that are going to pour out. I mean, if God didn't shorten the length of those days, even life couldn't exist.
Yeah.
It's going to be that severe. But he's reminding Daniel that even though this is somewhere into the future, we know now it's been a long ways into the future.
Yeah.
It's God was not going to forsake. Because there are going to be Jews that we have Jews that get saved today.
Yeah.
And there's going to be Jews that get saved in the last half of the tribulation period. They're the ones that, I believe, when it talks about a nation saved in a day, after the Battle of Armageddon.
Yeah.
So he's not leaving him without hope, because all of the writers, in particular all of your minor prophet writers, by that we mean shorter books, always left their people with the encouragement that God is not going to leave them or forsake them.
And so God doesn't even wait for Daniel to say, Lord, I don't understand.
Yeah.
When is
Because
this?
he's getting ready to do that.
Yeah. And God tells Daniel, shut up the book.
Yeah.
Seal up the book. Shut up the words, seal up the book. Even to the time of the end. In other words, Daniel, I gave you this, write it down, close the book. And
It's not for your time.
It's not for you. It's for a future generation.
But it was very troubling because he knew it was for his people.
Yeah.
In the future.
And but then God gives us something here that every prophecy preacher has used for decades now. We call it signs of the time. When you see these things, know that it's at the door. There are two mentioned here that are very important. One of them is, he says, seal up the book, even to the time of the end, colon. So let me read it again. Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. In other words, what I just gave you, shut it up, seal it, even to the time of the end, till the time of the end, colon. And I think now he's telling us what it will be like at the time of the end. And he gives two things. Many shall run to and fro. And number two, knowledge shall be increased.
Yes.
Those are some pretty big things.
I think outside of the major sign to us in prophecy and Christianity as a whole, that we know we are nearing the end of the church age and the beginning of what we call the tribulation. We know that the number one sign is Israel back in the land and all of the things of prophecy that surround them. Many prophecies have been fulfilled in the life of that. But I think the two most important outside of that, and there are others that Jesus gives in the Olivet Discourse, but I think two of the most important is those very two that you're getting ready to deal with.
Speaking of Israel, before we get into these, M.R. DeHaan, one of my favorite guys, I mean, his ministry is at its peak right at the time, right before
in the 40s.
That big event takes place. In fact, he writes his book on Revelation in 1947. I think it's copyrighted in 1947. 1 year or so before Israel, the May 14th, Israel becomes a nation. Right. He said in there, he gave a couple things. He said, someday man will go to the moon. I'm sure people laughed at him about that. He said, one day man will travel faster than the speed of sound. What, 800 something miles an hour? I don't know, something like that. And I'm sure people laughed at that. What are you talking about, 800 miles? How are we going to go 800 miles an hour? Do you know, in the 1800s, early 1800s,
1850s,
doctors said if you went 30 miles an hour, your heart couldn't take you, you'd die.
Yeah.
And we laugh. Now we get the last laugh.
Yeah.
30 miles. You can go that fast on a bicycle.
Now, the closer we get to all of these events, the more light of understanding has been given to us.
The third thing that M.R. DeHaan said was, and I'm sure he got laughed at, but he said one day Israel will be back in their land. It will be a nation again. He was a year or so off. Now, I don't know what year he died. I don't know if he was alive when it happened or not, but he was a seer, M.R. DeHaan. Yeah. He saw things and he knew things, and he was right. And it was just a little
I can remember as a
after.
boy growing up, my uncle was very well known for speaking in independent Baptist circles at that time on prophecy. And he would always say, even in his teaching or personally to me, because he only had one son and that son was estranged from the family. So he took a great affinity toward me. And he said, I don't know how it's going to happen, but God said it's going to happen. So I'm going to declare it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course it did. They got the land, but nobody saw
Nope.
1967
Yep.
when they took Jerusalem. That's huge. And I believe, I've always said for years, I could be wrong, I've said that I believe the fig tree took root in 48. I think the budding of the fig tree, if we're right about that story, if that does mean what we think it means, I see the budding of the fig tree when they take Jerusalem in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
But either way you look at it, it's big and we're close.
And that is the most important, I think, because it is everything in prophecy, past, present, future, actually revolves around Israel. That's why, as we touched on a while ago about the four kings, west and east and south and north, that's all measured from Jerusalem.
Right.
It's in those directions from Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so
us Americans, we tend to look at everything from our point of view. Yeah.
And but prophecy is about Israel. So then the second one is, I believe the fact that you're going to see, and we're already seeing, we touched on it in one of our updates not long ago. They now have an airplane that can travel 3 times the speed of sound. And one account says that they have a new interceptor jet that they say can fly faster than the speed of light. If that's the case, you won't see it.
That's good.
I'm serious.
That's good.
And so we're living in a time where travel, you think of our church just came back, had 18 people over in Uganda. They just came back. Well, it took them 30 hours to get there and 30-something to get back. But yet they went all the way to the heart of Africa, to the Nile River, there in Uganda. How could you have done that whenever Daniel wrote this? It would have taken half of his lifetime almost to have gotten through to there.
On a ship with sails, it would have took months and months just to get across the
And in the early days of the Philadelphian area of the church age, as a missionary began to launch out into the world with a spreading of the gospel, the only way they could get there was by ship or a long, long walk.
Yeah.
And today, look what we can do.
Well, it says here, man shall run to and fro, a sign given.
I think that might also mean how busy they are of running to and fro.
This is the to and fro generation.
It is.
And a sign given concerning the time of the end. I believe it is speaking of a time we are living in right now.
Absolutely.
It is amazing how travel has changed over the years. And I wrote this down. For the first 5,800 years of human history,
there you go.
Man could only travel as fast as a horse could carry him. Mm-hmm. Or a sailboat could get you across the water, not very fast. In the early 1800s, the invention of the steam engine, the train, began to change everything. They called it the Iron Horse. I give this as an example here. It revolutionized the world and was basically the start of what we call the industrial age. From that time forward, things have literally accelerated. Now things are changing so fast you can't keep up with them. Right. As soon as a computer or a cell phone comes on the market, by the time you buy it and get it downloaded and start using it, the next one's already coming out on the shelf. Yeah. And they got a faster one and a faster one.
It's amazing. Just a moment. You talked about whenever that Iron Horse came on and whenever those early days of the development of a steam engine parallels almost the early days. The King James Bible had just been brought out not long before that. Yeah. In other words, all of these advancements are tied, I believe, to the Philadelphian era of the church age, to be able to do what the Philadelphian era did, expand the gospel to the known world again.
Printing press, 1450.
Yes. And but since then, we've moved into the Laodicean era, and all of those things have become more of a deterrent than an advancement of the gospel.
Yeah. Although there's a lot of bad television.
Oh, yes.
But yet
There's good.
There's some good.
It's a tool. It's a medium.
Yeah.
But it seems like the devil's crowd and even his influence on quote-unquote Christian movements utilize it more negatively than folks like us. We don't have the financial ability to do what we'd like to do, because this world belongs to the devil. He's the prince and power of this world. He's going to bless financially of his system to those that are his servants. He's going to do everything he can to hinder God's servants.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the traveling to and for, the fast pace, that's sign number. And then the third sign is the next one.
Knowledge shall be increased.
Yes.
Yeah.
I read an article, and I was watching Glenn Beck the other evening. We watch everything on YouTube in the clips that we want to watch for news.
Yeah.
News is worthless out here in the world.
Yeah.
And he made this statement because he was talking about the advancement of a new chip that Microsoft a couple of days ago said they've discovered, have printed. They have a new state of materialism that they're able to be able to use it. It's about 100 times faster than anything that we've had to this point, even with quantum computers. In other words, with a little bitty chip put in that phone you just displayed, you would be able to do computer work 10,000 times faster than you could do solving a math problem.
Have you
itself.
heard of, now my son's told me about this stuff. Have you heard of quantum computing?
Oh, yes.
It's scary.
I know one of the men that has worked with our museum. He's with the Lord now, Dr. David Otway Ray. He was one of the 2 people in the world at their level of quantum algebra. And he explained to me how that worked. Well, I got about that much of what he explained, but it's mind-blowing.
My son explained it this way. He said, Dad, they're so fast, they can look for a password.
Yes.
Those big, long passwords. Now, mathematically, you could never,
No.
in lifetimes, you could never go through. He said those things can go so fast that they could generate someone's passwords in minutes. And
Well, Glenn Beck's program the other day, this coupled with artificial intelligence is going to make it virtually impossible to hide anything, period.
yeah, and they shall not be able to buy or sell. Say they have the
There
mark.
you go.
And they'll know where you are. They'll know who you are.
Another
There'll
step.
be no hiding.
But in my research, and I hadn't researched it in a couple of years because I haven't had a need necessarily to, but today, the knowledge for I think it was 1900 years before it doubled. Anyway, between 1850 and 1900 it doubled, and then to about 1940 doubled again. But what's happening today, because of quantum abilities, artificial intelligence, we're now doubling the amount of knowledge or information every 12 hours. And so you wonder why we live in a world where everybody is on edge, where there's so many people taking pills to calm their nerves, is because the human brain cannot acclimate to the changes of just 12 hours ago. And so we're living in a state that has, through technology and through this increase of information, where the world is constantly on edge because the brain is not capable of acclimating life to the changes that are happening so rapidly.
Yep, Daniel was told to seal up the book till the time of the end. These prophecies were not to be understood until the final generation.
I believe that's us.
That's us. That would come upon the scene.
Yeah.
And why do you suppose that? No, first of all, they couldn't have comprehended what.
Namely, they couldn't comprehend it, but it's part of the way God designed to bring a revelation or an enlightenment to the understanding. When you got to those times, you would be able to understand you're at those times.
I wrote here, We can understand prophecy today better than the great theologians of the past.
Oh, yes.
Spurgeon, D.L. Moody. Not that they were smart men, they were godly men.
Absolutely.
But they couldn't understand these things.
Right.
And I usually give the illustration of George Washington out in Valley Forge with his musket, and he reads that verse: "Except the Lord shorten the days, no flesh will be saved." He would laugh at that. How's that? How are you going to kill anybody in the world with this rifle that I've got here?
And today, almost with a push of a button, the
world
atomic
could destroy itself in an hour.
Plutonium bombs and whatever else they have.
We've got stuff we don't even know about.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of this UFO junk is. It's military stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
That we can't understand.
Yeah. No. And some of it's because we live in an age of billionaires, they're able to do what governments can do in research.
Verses 5 and 6, "Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood over other two, one on the side of the bank room, the other side." Let me just read a little bit of it here. One of them said, "How long shall it be to the end of these wonders?"
Yes.
Everybody wants to know.
Everybody wants to know.
How long?
Not very long.
And I wrote, every generation has asked these same questions, yet we are that final generation.
I believe it.
And look, if the world's going to be 6,000 years, and I am 1,000% convinced it will be, plus the 1,000-year kingdom age on the end, 7,000 years, then we're there.
If I didn't believe that we're the final generation, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now doing this. I'd probably be out on the boat fishing.
Yeah.
No, seriously, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I am convinced that we are here.
Yeah. And I heard a man clothed in linen, and he said, "It shall be for a time, times and a half, 3.5 years."
There's your last 3.5 years.
And that's the final final 3.5 of the tribulation before the kingdom age. "And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished."
Yes.
And so go thy way, Daniel, for thy words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. That's the second time he told him that. And so...
Well, I kind of like that over the book of Revelation. He says, "It is finished." That's what he's talking about.
God always keeps his promises. Some lessons here. The Bible can always be trusted. Number 3, we can understand prophecy better than any other generation ever has.
That's right.
We have no excuse to not see it coming.
That's right.
There is no excuse for you and I, ladies and gentlemen, to not realize that the end is near. There's no excuse for you to not witness to your loved ones, witness to your friends, tell them, "Hey, Jesus is coming back soon, you better." There's no excuse for us today. None. We are at the end of I like what the Lord of the Rings, here we are at the end of all things. And by the way, we are.
Yes.
Well, until next time, keep your eyes on them skies.